The climate between Canada and the United States has warmed up once and for all. After Donald Trump decided to increase tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel, the Canadian government lost patience and decided to act. And the response came heavily. In the first days of the new Prime Minister's mandate, a movement against the U.S. began to gain strength, especially in Ontario, a province that generates $110 billion in trade with the Americans. Trade tension in North America has reached a new level. In retaliation, the Canadian government announced a 25% reduction in electricity exports to the United States. The message was clear. If Trump wants to play hardball, Canada is also ready to respond. This trade war had already been generating uncertainty for weeks, but now Ontario has decided to take an even bolder step. Provincial Premier Doug Ford has declared he will also impose a 25% tax on electricity sent to the U.S. With this, Canada makes it clear that it will not accept these tariffs without reacting, and this dispute promises to get even more intense. Have you ever wondered why Ontario decided to put its foot on the gas and impose a 25% tariff on electricity exported to the USA? Well, this decision is no small feat. In addition to shaking up neighboring energy markets, it could shake up the global economy. After all, we are talking about a financial impact of around $110 billion. But what prompted Ontario to take this bold step? How might Donald Trump react? And perhaps most importantly, how will Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, manage this bombshell midway through his term? This change in the energy sector is likely to cause political and economic turbulence between Canada and the United States. And under Carney's leadership, Canada is about to undergo a transformation that could redefine its international relations. Here, we dive behind the scenes of this growing tension, understand how Canada is taking Trump's provocations, and find out what the next move in this trade game will be. Ontario has already made official the 25% tariff on electricity sent to the USA. And now, the consequences of this decision promise to be great. If you are against Trump's abusive policies and want to closely monitor how Canada is reacting, subscribe to the channel now and stay up to date with every twist and turn of this dispute. If the trade dispute between Canada and the United States continues to heat up, Canada has already made it clear that it is ready to raise its tone even further. Relations between the two countries have been tense for weeks, with Trump releasing new tariff threats almost every day. And Ontario didn't stand still. Premier Doug Ford decided to fight back and announced an increase in the price of electricity sent to about 1.5 million homes in Minnesota, New York, and Michigan. The message was direct. If the U.S. wants to squeeze Canada with tariffs on its products, it will feel the brunt of the retaliation. Ford didn't mince words. I'm really sorry for the American people because they didn't start this trade war. There is only one person responsible, and that is President Trump. He further explained that the new tariff could add around $100 a month to the electricity bills of affected Americans, generating between $300,000 and $400,000 a day for Ontario. This money, he says, will be used to alleviate electricity costs for Canadians. Ultimately, this strategy could represent a $110 billion annual burden on U.S. electricity imports. Ford stressed that, despite the tension, the two countries should focus on what strengthens them, not what separates them. After meeting with 3 American governors, he assured that there is an understanding of the situation. Now the question is whether the USA will want to follow the path of cooperation or insist on conflict. And do you think Trump is picking an unnecessary fight with Canada? Comment below if you believe that, in the end, the USA will lose out. The trade war between Canada and the United States is on fire, and Ontario isn't just watching. The province decided to counterattack with heavy measures. It removed American alcoholic beverages from the shelves, banned U.S. companies from participating in government purchases, and to top it off, the federal government had already applied retaliatory tariffs worth $30 billion on American products. And there's more. Ontario has implemented a new tax on electricity exported to the U.S. Energy Minister Stephen Lexy issued a directive mandating that any generator that sells electricity to Americans charges an extra fee called a response fee. This amount will be collected by the electrical system operator and passed on to the Canadian government. But the great thing about this strategy is flexibility. Ontario can increase or reduce the rate at any time, depending on the United States government's next moves. This means the province can react quickly to any new threat coming from Trump. In the USA, reactions were immediate. The state of Minnesota has tried to minimize the impact of the tariff, saying it relies little on Canadian electricity. But Democratic Governor Tim Walz did not hold back in his criticism. He blamed Trump for provoking this retaliation and warned that the real losers will be Minnesotans, who are already struggling to pay increasingly expensive energy bills. Tension continues to grow, and the big question now is, who will back down first? The trade war between Canada and the United States is starting to weigh on Americans' pockets, and many politicians are already calling for this fight to end before the damage becomes even greater. In Michigan, the biggest concern is the stability of the electrical grid. Matt Helms of the State Public Service Commission downplayed the immediate impact to consumers, as most power comes from local sources or long-term contracts. But he issued a warning: any interruption in the flow of electricity between the two countries could compromise the security of the grid, increasing the risk of blackouts for both Americans and Canadians. Meanwhile, in New York, Governor Kathy Hochul did not hold back in her criticism. She ordered a detailed review to understand the impact of the new tariffs on the state's electricity bill and energy costs. Hochul called Trump's tariffs poorly planned, done in secret, and without any solid economic basis. According to her, these measures only serve to destabilize the markets and make families and businesses in New York even more insecure. Trump's response, as expected, came in kind. He wasted no time in attacking Canada's position and made it clear that he does not intend to back down anytime soon. Tension continues to rise, and apparently this trade dispute is still far from over. Trump didn't let it go and hit back, accusing Canada of being a tariff abuser. He doubled down, saying the United States no longer needs Canadian resources and will not continue subsidizing the country. For Trump, this trade war has to be reciprocal, and the U.S. will recover everything it lost. But Doug Ford was not silent. He responded by suggesting that Canada could reduce electricity generation from hydroelectric dams and encouraged other provinces to use their own energy resources. In particular, he pointed to Alberta, which sends around 4 million barrels of oil per day to the United States. Ford even sent a direct message to Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. He suggested that a tax on oil exports could be a strategic move. He argued that if gasoline prices rose between 90 cents and $1 per gallon, Americans would be outraged, and perhaps that would force a change in the U.S. stance. But Danielle Smith was categorical in her response. No way. She made it clear that Alberta would never take such an extreme measure, calling the idea self-defeating. She says such a tax would mean the loss of hundreds of thousands of jobs for Canadians and Albertans, a price she is simply not willing to pay. And so the tension continues to grow, with each side looking for its next move in this trade clash that seems far from over. The idea of taxing oil exports didn't work. Danielle Smith was blunt and rejected the proposal, comparing it to a tariff on auto parts in Ontario, something she said would be a disaster. But rising rates in Ontario are not just a matter of energy demand. There's a much bigger game going on, involving environmental policies and international trade disputes. And all of this is now under the leadership of Mark Carney, Canada's new Prime Minister. Carney, who previously headed the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, won the Liberal Party leadership race with almost 86% of the vote. The transition of power between him and Justin Trudeau should take place in the coming days, and rumors suggest that he may call new elections soon after taking office. And he is taking over the government at a very turbulent time. The global economy is already unstable, and the White House's policies are only making everything more chaotic. U.S. trading partners live in a scenario of uncertainty, with sudden changes in tariffs and new rules appearing out of nowhere. Trump, for example, imposed a 25% tariff on most Canadian and Mexican products. He even promised relief to anyone who followed the requirements of the North American Trade Agreement, but soon after threw in cold water, announcing heavy tariffs on Canadian timber and dairy products. And things could get worse. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has already let slip that further action is on the way, which means that the impact of these measures on the Canadian economy is still far from over. The big question now is, what will be Canada's next move in this trade war? The 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum imports will return with full force on March 12th. And this is not the first time that Trump has stirred this hornet's nest. He has already said that he wanted to transform Canada into the 51st state of the USA, a statement that, as expected, caused outrage among Canadians. The response was immediate. Consumers began to boycott American products, and the government began looking for new commercial partners. Justin Trudeau warned that Trump's threats against Canadian sovereignty cannot be underestimated, and Mark Carney in his victory speech was even more emphatic. America is not Canada, and Canada will never be part of America. We do not seek that fight, but if anyone wants confrontation, the Canadians will always be ready. In commerce, as in hockey, Canada wins. Carney made it clear that retaliatory tariffs against the U.S. will continue until Americans show respect and commit to fair trade. And that's not all. All the money raised from these tariffs will go towards protecting Canadian workers. But he doesn't stop there. Carney has ambitious plans to transform Canada into the strongest economy in the G7. His promises include strategic investments, the creation of new trade corridors with reliable allies, and the consolidation of the country as an energy power. Throughout the campaign, he sold himself as a crisis expert. And, with the challenges ahead, this experience will be more than necessary. The question now is, how will Trump react? And will Canada be able to maintain its position without suffering major impacts? The trade war is just beginning. Mark Carney has been in charge of major central banks in moments of pure tension, such as the global financial crisis and the turbulent Brexit. But when it comes to politics, he is still a novice, and for now, he doesn't even have a seat in Parliament. To compete for leadership, Carney gave up important positions, such as the presidency of Brookfield Asset Management and Bloomberg Incorporated. During his campaign, he strongly emphasized the need to expand Canadian trade to new markets and reduce internal barriers that hinder business. And he came with bold proposals. He promised to review some controversial liberal policies, such as the increase in capital gains tax and carbon taxes on consumers. Furthermore, it wants to use federal government resources to invest heavily in strategic projects. Your most ambitious economic plan? Split the federal budget into two. One operational, which he committed to balancing, and the other focused on capital investments, making room for billions of dollars in improvements to the country's infrastructure and productivity. Carney has already made it clear that he is not afraid to take radical steps to make Canada more competitive. And to anyone who doubts his vision, he bluntly responded, "We can do so much more than Donald Trump." Now, it remains to be seen whether he will be able to turn these promises into reality, and how his political opponents will react to his direct and strategic style. Trump has already warned, this will not be a period of ordinary negotiations. We will have to make decisions we never imagined before, and at a speed we never considered possible, he declared, making it clear that the trade game between the USA and Canada is far from smooth. Meanwhile, in Canada, the political scene is on fire. Elections are scheduled for October, but instability in Parliament could bring the vote forward. With the Liberal Party without a majority in the House of Commons, the country could go to the polls sooner than expected. And now Mark Carney has a difficult choice ahead of him. Risk an early election, leaving the government in the hands of a caretaker in the midst of the trade war, or try to hold on for longer, forging alliances with an opposition party. Trudeau's resignation, Carney's arrival, and Trump's threats changed the political game. The Liberals, who had been losing badly to the Conservatives for more than a year, began to recover in the polls. But Conservatives aren't making it easy. Party leader Pierre Poilievre fired criticism at Carney, accusing him of a lack of transparency and demanding he reveal his financial holdings to avoid suspicions of a conflict of interest. Additionally, Carney was heavily attacked for trying to downplay his involvement in Brookfield's controversial change in strategy. Conservatives took advantage of the moment to question their political and economic credibility. The stage is set. On one side, Carney trying to consolidate his government and face pressure from Trump. On the other, Conservatives trying to overthrow him before he even manages to gain a foothold. The next few weeks promised to be decisive. Last year, Mark Carney found himself in the middle of a controversy when Brookfield decided to move its headquarters to New York. Of course, the Conservatives wasted no time using this against him. But Carney retaliated. remembering that Pierre Poilievre had already threatened the then governor of the Bank of Canada, Tiff Macklem, in 2022. For Carney, this attack by Poilievre only served to weaken the Canadian economy at a time of great instability. And the criticism didn't stop there. Carney also slammed Poilievre's stance on climate and energy policy. According to him, Ontario's recent decision to tax electricity will not only affect relations between Canada and the United States, but could have repercussions on global energy markets. Now, under Carney's leadership, Canada is at a turning point. He will have to balance trade disputes with the U.S., define strategic energy policies, and reinforce his diplomatic position in the world. The impact of these decisions goes far beyond Canada. The eyes of the world are focused on the next steps in this conflict. Join us in the fight against Trump's abusive policies. Subscribe to the channel now and keep up with everything that's happening in American politics and how it could impact your life. Next door, there's another video waiting for you with the latest updates. See you there.